Area 51, America's most secretive military facility, was suddenly shut down after capturing something so extraordinary that it threatened to expose decades of hidden truth. Bob Lazar, the physicist who first revealed Area 51's alien technology programs to the world, claims the U.S. government made an unprecedented decision that changed everything. What goes on at this secretive facility? Today we're diving deep into Lazar's most shocking revelation yet, one that could rewrite our understanding of what really happened at the world's most classified base. Bob Lazar's journey to becoming the world's most famous UFO whistleblower began long before his explosive 1989 television interview. Born on January 26, 1959 in Coral Gables, Florida, Lazar's early life reads like something out of a science fiction novel, though many details remain mysteriously absent from official records. Even his birth certificate has vanished from public records, leading to speculation about government interference in his personal history. What we do know paints a picture of a brilliant but unconventional mind. Lazar claims he was a child prodigy who spent his youth obsessed with the fundamentals of science and engineering. His most famous childhood exploit involved outfitting his bicycle with a jet engine, allegedly reaching speeds over 100 miles per hour. These weren't just tall tales from an attention-seeking teenager. Lazar's high school records, like much of his early documentation, are conspicuously missing. However, he reportedly attended Pierce Junior College in Los Angeles before moving on to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he obtained a master's degree in physics. He then earned another master's degree in electronics from the California Institute of Technology. The first verifiable proof of Lazar's scientific credentials came through his work at Los Alamos National Laboratory. A newspaper report from July 30, 1982, featured Lazar discussing his jet-powered car project and demonstrating his ability to replace conventional engines with jet-powered versions. This wasn't just theoretical work. Lazar was actively experimenting with advanced propulsion systems years before his Area 51 revelations. But how does a physicist working on jet engines end up at the most classified military installation in America? The answer lies in Lazar's growing reputation within scientific circles and his connections to individuals with high-level security clearances. What happened next would change not only Lazar's life but potentially our understanding of advanced technology and extraterrestrial contact. On May 15, 1989, CBS reporter George Knapp aired a contentious interview with a silhouetted source who identified himself as Dennis. The man described working at a covert installation called S4 and claimed first-hand exposure to recovered extraterrestrial craft, unusual propulsion systems, and non-human beings. Months later, the source revealed his name, Bob Lazar, a physicist formerly associated with Los Alamos. Lazar said he initially used a false identity to avoid retaliation but later went public as the story gained attention. Lazar's account says his recruitment looked routine at first. As a propulsion specialist, he was offered work on advanced aircraft development that required top security clearances. He recalled assembling with colleagues at an EGG facility, being flown to Groom Lake, then moved by bus with completely blacked-out windows to a more secretive site. That site, S4, was built into a mountainside south of Area 51. Hangar doors were camouflaged to blend with the rock and opened only for vehicle movements. Inside S4, Lazar described strict compartmentalization. Teams worked in isolated cells so no one person knew every detail of all projects. Assigned to reverse engineer one of the recovered craft, he said these vehicles were not conventional airplanes but employed what he called anti-gravity technology. According to his briefings, their power plant resembled an antimatter reactor fueled by a previously unknown element he labeled Element 115. This element, Lazar claimed, produced gravity waves that the craft used to manipulate gravitational fields, enabling radical maneuverability and a form of visual concealment through light bending. Lazar also said the classified documentation he was required to read recast parts of human history, including references to extraterrestrial contact and influence over the past 10,000 years. He named the non-human occupants gray aliens, and linked their origin to a planet around the binary star system Zeta Reticuli. Perhaps the most unsettling moment he recounted occurred during a routine walk. Through a door window, he saw two men in lab coats speaking with a small, live being with elongated limbs, an encounter that, he said, corroborated the briefing material. Taken together, Lazar's claims allege that U.S. programs were not only studying crashed or recovered craft but were in direct contact with the entities associated with them. His story sparked intense debate because it combined technical detail from someone claiming scientific credentials with extraordinary assertions about classified government projects and non-human life. Perhaps the most scientifically intriguing aspect of Bob Lazar's claims centered on his description of element 115, a super-heavy element that he claimed powered the alien spacecraft at S4. In 1989, when Lazar first went public with his story, the scientific community largely dismissed his claims about this mysterious element. The periodic table at the time only extended to element 109, and the idea of a stable super-heavy element seemed like pure science fiction. Lazar described element 115 as the key to understanding how the alien craft achieved their impossible flight characteristics. According to his account, this element existed in a stable form that was impossible to create on Earth due to our planet's nuclear physics limitations. The aliens, he claimed, had obtained this element from a location where such super-heavy elements could exist naturally, possibly from a planet with different nuclear physics properties. The element served as fuel for an antimatter reactor that generated tremendous amounts of energy. But more importantly, Lazar claimed that element 115 had unique properties that allowed it to be bombarded with protons to create element 116, which immediately decayed back to element 115 while releasing antimatter in the process. This antimatter was then used to power the craft's propulsion system. What made element 115 truly revolutionary, according to Lazar, was its ability to generate gravity waves. He described how the element's atomic structure created a distortion in the space-time fabric around it, essentially allowing the craft to fall toward its destination rather than being propelled by conventional thrust. This explained how the alien vehicles could make sharp turns at incredible speeds without affecting the occupants inside, as they weren't experiencing traditional acceleration forces. For years, Lazar's claims about element 115 were used by skeptics to discredit his entire story. The scientific consensus was that such an element couldn't exist, and even if it could be synthesized, it would be highly unstable and decay almost instantly. Then, in 2013, everything changed. A team of Russian scientists at the Flerov Laboratory for Nuclear Reactions, led by nuclear physicist Yuri Oganessian, successfully synthesized element 115 using a particle accelerator. They bombarded americium-243 with calcium-48 ions, creating 4 atoms of the super-heavy element that existed for a fraction of a second before decaying. The scientific community officially recognized the discovery, and element 115 was eventually named Moscovium in honor of Moscow, where it was first created. While the synthesized version was highly unstable and bore little resemblance to Lazar's description of a stable variant, the mere fact that element 115 could exist vindicated at least part of his claims. This discovery sparked renewed interest in Lazar's story. Here was a man who, in 1989, had described an element that mainstream science insisted couldn't exist, yet decades later, that same element was successfully created in a laboratory. The implications were staggering. If Lazar was correct about element 115, what else might he have been right about? The element's position near what scientists call the island of stability suggests that there might indeed be isotopes of super-heavy elements that could exist for much longer periods than currently synthesized versions. Some theoretical physicists now speculate that under the right conditions, certain isotopes of element 115 could potentially exist for minutes, hours, or even longer, making Lazar's claims about a stable version less impossible than once thought. But the discovery of element 115 raised as many questions as it answered. If such elements could exist in stable forms, where would they come from? How would an advanced civilization obtain and utilize them? And most importantly, how did Bob Lazar know about element 115 decades before mainstream science proved its existence? And before we continue unfolding this fascinating discovery, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Don't forget to share it with your friends too. It helps the channel out, and I'm excited to continue bringing you more awesome content. Bob Lazar's claims about extraterrestrial contact at Area 51 were long dismissed by mainstream science and officials. Beginning in 2017, however, a string of disclosures gave parts of his account newfound credibility. On December 16, 2017, the New York Times revealed the existence of a secret Pentagon program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which had for years investigated unidentified aerial phenomena. The report, based on official sources, showed the government was studying objects that exhibited flight characteristics far beyond known human technology, instant acceleration, and extreme maneuverability, and other behaviors that challenge conventional physics. For researchers and Lazar supporters, this was a major official acknowledgement that unexplained aerial phenomena warranted serious attention. Luis Elizondo, a former Pentagon official who directed ATIP from 2010 to 2017, emerged as a central figure. A career intelligence officer with top-secret clearance, Elizondo said the program documented numerous encounters in which objects were tracked by multiple radar systems, observed by trained military personnel, and recorded by advanced sensors. These were not isolated sightings but cases with corroborating instrument data. One of the most prominent incidents involved the USS Nimitz carrier strike group in 2004. Radar aboard the USS Princeton detected multiple objects rapidly descending from very high altitudes to just above the ocean, maneuvers no known aircraft could survive. The objects hovered for long periods, then accelerated to extreme speeds and vanished from radar. Commander David Fravor, an experienced Navy pilot, was dispatched to intercept. He described encountering a roughly 40-foot, white, tic-tac-shaped object with no visible wings, engines, or control surfaces, moving with deliberate precision. As Fravor approached, the object appeared to mirror his actions, then abruptly accelerated away at an extraordinary rate, later reappearing some 60 miles away. The encounter was recorded by forward-looking infrared cameras, and the release footage showed motion and rotations that defied standard aerodynamic explanation. The Nimitz episode drew attention because its observed behaviors closely resembled descriptions Lazar gave decades earlier about the craft he said were studied at S4, vehicles that could hover, rotate, and accelerate instantly without visible propulsion, thanks to an alleged anti-gravity system. Lazar had described such craft as powered by an antimatter-style reactor using a then-unknown element he called Element 115, which purportedly generated gravity waves the craft used to manipulate fields and achieve extreme maneuvers. Elizondo has said ATIP investigated hundreds of similar instances, many with multiple witnesses and sensor confirmation. The program also noted patterns. Objects frequently appeared near military installations and nuclear facilities, echoing long-standing reports from service members who'd observed unexplained aerial phenomena around weapon sites. Public statements by high-profile figures added to the shift. When asked about unexplained aerial phenomena, former President Barack Obama acknowledged the existence of objects the government could not explain and that officials had briefed him on such matters, while remaining circumspect about details. The government's stance moved from ridicule and suppression of reporters and service members to a more open posture, encouraging personnel to report incidents without fearing career repercussions. Taken together, these revelations, official acknowledgement of a dedicated investigative program, credible witnesses with corroborating sensor data, and the government's evolving response reframed earlier dismissals of Lazar's story. Where his claims once seemed implausible, the accumulation of documented cases and institutional attention made questions about what the government knew, and when it knew it, more urgent. If objects with extraordinary capabilities have been monitored and analyzed for years, then Lazar's assertion that some programs sought to study and possibly reverse engineer advanced non-human technology appears less outlandish than it once did. The U.S. government's response to Bob Lazar has been a mix of denial, legal pressure, and selective silence that has intensified speculation about his claims. After his 1989 TV appearance, federal investigators did more than dismiss him. They appeared to work systematically to undermine his background. Records that should have been verifiable, education and employment, were reportedly lost, inaccessible, or contradicted, creating gaps critics used to challenge his credibility. That level of effort suggested to some observers that authorities were anxious about what he might reveal. Harassment escalated into legal action. In 2006, Lazar and his wife faced federal charges under the Hazardous Substances Act for allegedly transporting restricted chemicals. Many saw the prosecution as disproportionate. In 2007, his company, United Nuclear Scientific, was fined for violations tied to chemical sales. These penalties sustained legal pressure on Lazar for years. The most conspicuous incident came in 2017, when FBI agents and local police raided Lazar's business while he was collaborating with filmmaker Jeremy Corbell on a documentary about his experiences. Officially, the search related to a murder probe involving thallium sulfate. The company sold chemicals used legitimately in research. Yet Lazar reported that agents also asked pointed questions about his past work and, notably, Element 115. That detail fed suspicions the criminal investigation provided cover for renewed interest in his claims about advanced technology. Taken together, the pattern of surveillance, prosecutions, and high-profile searches looked different from typical responses to hoaxes. Rather than quick debunking or indifference, Lazar experienced prolonged scrutiny and periodic legal trouble spanning decades, actions that, to many, implied the government considered him a potential security concern. This history gained new context as official attitudes toward unidentified aerial phenomena shifted. In 2020, the Pentagon publicly released 3 videos showing UAPs, including the Tic-Tac footage from the 2004 Nimitz encounter. The Department of Defense created the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, later renamed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, to investigate such incidents. Congressional hearings followed, with officials acknowledging objects that displayed capabilities beyond known technology, including extreme acceleration, abrupt maneuvers, and operations in multiple environments. Those developments marked a significant reversal from decades of ridicule and secrecy. The evolving record created a striking contradiction. Agencies that had worked to discredit Lazar were simultaneously confirming the existence of unexplained objects whose behavior resembled the craft he had described, vehicles that could hover, rotate, and accelerate abruptly without visible propulsion. Luis Elizondo, the former Pentagon official who led the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, and military witnesses like Commander David Fravor described encounters that paralleled elements of Lazar's account. More recently, whistleblower testimony has further complicated the story. David Grush, a former intelligence officer, testified to Congress that the government possessed intact and partially intact craft of non-human origin and associated biological evidence. Grush's claims were presented under legal protections for whistleblowers and prompted official inquiries. Officials treated his testimony as a matter requiring investigation rather than outright dismissal. That differential treatment, Lazar's decades of apparent harassment versus more recent protections and formal hearings for other whistleblowers, raises questions. One plausible explanation is the specificity of Lazar's claims. His detailed descriptions of a particular site and technology might risk exposing active programs or classified methods, so authorities may have reacted more aggressively. Later whistleblowers tended to offer broader, less facility-specific allegations which could be addressed through oversight channels without the same operational risk. In sum, the government's posture toward Lazar, ranging from record disputes and prosecutions to raids, combined with its later, more open handling of UAP investigations, creates a complex picture. The shift toward acknowledging unexplained phenomena while still denying or downplaying specific elements of Lazar's narrative highlights unresolved tensions about what has been studied, where it was studied, and what remains classified. The most dramatic escalation in official interest in Bob Lazar came on July 19, 2017, when federal agents raided his business, United Nuclear Scientific Equipment. The operation involved the FBI, local police, and other agencies, and its timing, just as Lazar was working with filmmaker Jeremy Corbell on a high-profile documentary, prompted intense speculation about motives beyond the stated purpose. Authorities said the search related to the 2015 death of Janelle Strebel, who had been poisoned with thallium sulfate, a toxic substance that United Nuclear sold for legitimate scientific uses. Investigators, according to reports, sought to identify customers who had purchased thallium. On the surface, this appeared to be a routine criminal inquiry. Thallium is highly toxic, colorless, odorless, and historically associated with covert poisonings. So tracing its sales is a reasonable investigative step. Lazar's account of the raid, however, added a different dimension. He acknowledged that most agents focused on the thallium matter, yet he said at least two questioned him directly about his past work and specifically about element 115. That detail fueled claims that the criminal probe provided cover for renewed interest in his assertions about alien technology and materials allegedly linked to S4. The raid's timing and intensity seemed incongruous to Lazar's supporters. Occurring as public attention on his story was resurging, the search appeared to mirror a long pattern of legal and regulatory pressure he endured. Federal charges in 2006 under the Hazardous Substances Act, fines against his company in 2007. And years of scrutiny that many interpreted as harassment intended to silence or discredit him. Rumors about element 115 further complicated perceptions. Since a synthetic isotope of element 115 was first produced in labs in 2013, speculation circulated that Lazar claimed to possess a stable variant he'd encountered at S4. Over the years, he hinted at having physical evidence of his work but remained vague. If he did hold a sample of a novel, stable element, it would be a matter of extraordinary scientific significance, potentially explaining intense official interest. Conversely, the lack of any public verification kept the claim speculative. The official murder investigation eventually identified a different source for the thallium, and Lazar's business was not implicated in the crime, raising questions about whether the raid was proportionate or whether it had other objectives. For critics, that outcome suggested the search may have been a convenient opportunity to seek materials or information tied to Lazar's claims under a legitimate law enforcement pretext. Regardless of motive, the 2017 raid marked a shift from periodic regulatory actions to an overt, forceful intrusion. It underscored how Lazar's case sits at the intersection of criminal inquiry, regulatory enforcement, and national security sensitivity. Against the backdrop of growing official acknowledgement of unexplained aerial phenomena, the episode reinforced tensions between public disclosure, classified programs, and the treatment of individuals who claim first-hand knowledge of alleged non-public technologies. Bob Lazar's credibility gained unexpected traction from a cluster of high-profile encounters and official disclosures that emerged in the late 2010s and early 2020s. The most consequential development came in June 2023 when David Grush, a former Air Force officer and intelligence official, publicly alleged, then testified under oath to Congress that U.S. agencies possessed multiple intact and partially intact craft of non-human origin. Grush's roles on the Pentagon's UAP tasking structures and within national intelligence agencies, plus his security clearances, made his claims difficult to dismiss as uninformed speculation. Grush described a long-running, compartmentalized crash retrieval and reverse engineering effort whose structure closely matched elements of Lazar's earlier account. Separate teams at different locations, strict need-to-know protocols, biological evidence tied to recovered craft, and active attempts to understand advanced propulsion systems. His testimony directly echoed Lazar's claim that specialists were recruited to analyze and replicate technologies far beyond current public capabilities. Congressional hearings also featured seasoned military pilots whose accounts reinforced these themes. Commander David Fravor detailed the 2004 Nimitz Tic Tac encounter, an object that hovered, accelerated instantly, and maneuvered without visible propulsion, behaviors Lazar had long described for the S4 craft. Ryan Graves recounted repeated sightings of anomalous objects during routine operations. These pilots were trained observers with corroborating sensor data, lending technical weight to their statements. The government's posture toward these reports shifted noticeably. The Pentagon released several UAP videos in 2020, established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office to investigate incidents, and Congress held sustained oversight hearings. Agencies also declassified historical files and reviewed past programs, signaling that unexplained aerial phenomena were being treated as legitimate national security and safety issues rather than fringe curiosities. That institutional turn, and the emergence of whistleblower testimony like Grush's, changed the context for assessing Lazar. Where his claims had once been widely ridiculed, the convergence of credible witnesses, sensor-confirmed incidents, and official acknowledgement made his assertions about government study and reverse engineering of anomalous technology appear less implausible. At the same time, many specifics of Lazar's narrative remain unverified. He offered detailed, site-specific descriptions, whereas recent disclosures and testimonies have tended to be broader, often withholding operational particulars for classification and oversight reasons. The result is a complex picture. Accumulation of official admissions, documented encounters, and whistleblower allegations has reopened questions about what programs exist, what was recovered, and how transparently those matters have been handled. Lazar's decades-old claims now sit alongside newer, institution-backed testimonies that collectively demand clearer answers about the scope and nature of government investigations into unexplained aerial phenomena. As we stand at this crossroads between decades of secrecy and an era of unprecedented disclosure, Bob Lazar's story remains one of the most compelling and controversial accounts in the history of UFO research. The convergence of his claims with recent government acknowledgments, credible witness testimony, and scientific discoveries has transformed him from a dismissed conspiracy theorist into a figure whose allegations demand serious consideration. What remains certain is that Bob Lazar's story has fundamentally changed how we think about the possibility of extraterrestrial contact and government secrecy. Whether his specific claims are proven true or false, his influence on the ongoing quest for truth about UFO phenomena will be remembered as a pivotal moment in the history of disclosure. The mystery continues, but thanks to individuals like Bob Lazar who were willing to risk everything to share their extraordinary experiences, we may finally be approaching the answers that have eluded us for so long. The truth, as they say, may indeed be out there, and we may be closer to finding it than ever before. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot to us. Click on the video that appears on your screen right now. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for being with us. Leave a comment, like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button for more exciting videos. See you next time.